Hello Internet, I'm the Disney Brain, back with part 2 of Lightspeed Rescue. Last time, we basically covered the first half of the plot, as well as discussed one of the more depressingly bad team-up episodes. One that had a lot more in common with this than this, but those queasy feelings are yesterday's news. So, let us now continue to dive into how the story progresses, starting with the introduction of Olympias. Everything I need to say about Olympias can more or less be highlighted within the context of the one episode he's most relevant in, Olympias Ascends, wherein the former half-pint proves himself a cut above your standard demon, not just by handling the Rangers with relative ease, since Ryan already did that before, but by also attempting to win the day from within. It's a smart setup, and seeing the not Carter cast, especially Chad, act both like and unlike themselves is a lot of fun. But what upends this concept is how Olympias can almost perfectly mimic mannerisms and some knowledge, but then randomly forgets other important bits, thus allowing Carter's suspicions to be justified. Simply put, it's a good idea that isn't executed that well, which is kind of weird for a season that has its fair share of plain ideas where it's all about executing well, and for the most part, they do that. I would be more forgiving if this ended up giving us early insight into how Olympias operates in contrast to his demon comrades, but it just doesn't. Instead, we never see Olympias act in such a cunning way ever again, those traits wiped from memory in favor of his borderline Oedipus complex. So then, we get to the Queen's return, where an attempted demon ritual seeks to bring Banshira back. It fails, of course, because we're nowhere near the season finale, but there's still a chance Banshira could be brought back later, and while she's stuck as some sort of cocoon sarcophagus hybrid, maybe, some of the other villains can start their own schemes to take each other out, which is handled with about as much intrigue as anything else these villains do this season, something we'll talk more about in the character breakdowns. After a slew of filler episodes, including a memory drain clip show of all things, we finally get back to the real plot with the culmination of Ryan's solo journey. He finds the Sorcerer of the Sands, who has a way to put the demons back in their box. This leads into Olympias Unbound, where Jinxter finally gets to deal a powerful blow onto the Rangers through his use of mental manipulation. And it ends up working a hell of a lot better than when Olympias himself tried something similar. Unfortunately for him, it produced fairly similar results, despite the prince's power spike. You'd think that after the Rangers deal a firm blow onto Olympias, and with the Queen waiting in the wings, that the story would naturally build up from there. But not quite. We've got a couple more fillers to get through. I know I keep harping on that, but I do think the back end of this season has a legitimate pacing problem. For as tight and as focused as a great deal of the early episodes were, things start to feel unnecessary and bloated as time marches on. Granted, you can make this claim about several seasons, but it really felt like this season was maybe 5 or 6 episodes longer than it needed to be. And the only thing of note happening during a lot of that time was Banshira slowly transforming and one shockingly late Battleizer episode. But we can forget about all of that once Wrath of the Queen kicks off what really is a 4-part season closer. Now, Fate of Lightspeed itself is a really good finale, but unfortunately, the pair of episodes leading into it have several issues. The defining element of this first of 4 is the fact that the Queen has nearly finished her transformation and only needs a little bit more energy to complete it. So, in Cell-like fashion, she decides that consuming one of her own will do just fine. So, goodbye Vipra, I guess? But the single worst aspect of this episode happens prior to that, with this shoehorned in buddy talk between Lokai and Diabolico. I'm sorry, what? We are at episode 37, and these demons have referred to this imaginary friendship a grand total of once. Hell, even when Diabolico dies, nothing, literally nothing about how Lokai acted in response spoke to eons of companionship. In fact, Viper and him wouldn't have even brought back Diabolico if they could have handled Olympias by themselves. Looking back at all this now gives me even more appreciation for the underrated pair of Jindrax and Toxica, 2 orgs with a much more believable friendship, or at the very least, an entertaining dynamic. So when Toxica dies by way of betrayal, the fact that Jindrax abandons his org heritage to bring her back before assisting the Rangers never strikes you as out of left field. These demons have never shown anything in the way of real layers, least of all compassion, so why are we all of a sudden pretending that they did? I apologize heavily for what I'm about to imply, but we've seen this very recently before. This is perhaps the original version of pulling a Dane Romero. A non-existent, emotionally lacking subplot all of a sudden is forced to matter just because the main plot demands it, and not because the story builds up to it. Did anyone care if Loki died? Did any of us have a reason to? At least Viper went out into the field and made things happen. It honestly should have been her in Loki's spot, while Loki played the role of royal appetizer. But either way, this whole last straw thing Diabolico pulls out of his rear only makes sense from the context of his growing mistrust of Banshira herself. That's all that needed to be highlighted here. This was already one of the lesser villain ensembles in Rangers, but then they go out of their way to make them look even worse during this home stretch. For the life of me, I just don't get it. This lapse in storytelling slips over to a degree with Rise of the Super Demons, where Carter has to appeal to Diabolico's humanity, I guess? I don't really fault Carter or any Ranger for taking this stance, because they have a valid reason to. None of them can comprehend being loyal to a queen that would willingly toss you aside. But even so, this is still the demons we're talking about. Specifically, the one that decided child abduction would make for a thrilling Sunday evening. What it comes right down to for me is that Diabolico never showed me enough to prove that if he were Demon King, he wouldn't do the same things Banshira did, which goes back to how one note the villains here are. But countering that was a strong showing from our heroes. Damn near everything you need to know about how far they've come can be seen through their Life Force Megazord trials. And it's not just Carter getting to be a badass again. This time, it takes everyone to respond to the largest threat they've faced yet. All in all, one jarringly flawed episode led to another subpar one. Thankfully, Dana managed to stop the bleeding just in time for Fate of Lightspeed. Here we see the culmination of several plans. Ryan is still on his solo campaign, eventually finding the key needed to lock away the demons. The Queen, likely fully aware of this potential wrench in her plans, proceeds to capture Ryan before he can regroup with the others. All the while, Banshira and Jinxer's plan to release an army of Batlings into the Megazords comes full swing, using the Life Force Megazord to destroy the Aqua Base, while the Omega Megazord prepares for another demon ceremony. All of this in an attempt to rid herself of Lightspeed and release every demon ever, all in one fell swoop. Part 1 of Fate of Lightspeed truly is one of the stronger setups for a Ranger season finale, and is all about establishing tension and the supremely elevated stakes. The demons even learned a valuable lesson from the last time they tried and failed to infiltrate the Aqua Base, and now they're taking things one step beyond by leveling that same base. And the best part is, the Aqua Base is perfectly designed for instilling this sense of overwhelming dread. The corridors are tight and narrow, there's not a ton of escape routes, especially if and when their connecting tubes become compromised. And the only thing keeping the people inside from drowning are these very breakable windows. And now, the biggest advantage this base had on the demons is being used by the demons to deal one final blow. I really can't think of a better use of this specific set than exactly what transpired here. Which brings us to part 2. After opening with a really well done hopeless scene, Miss Fairweather gives Joel all the motivation he needs to really save the day. This entire transition from battling invasion to Aqua Base attack to pure shock and exasperation, leading into a renewed focus, might just be the best executed progression of the whole season, and it all leads up to a really cool scene where Joel decides to add water by force, giving them reins over the Lightspeed submarine, and then all 6 Rangers finally reunite for one final showdown. This was a welcome final beatdown, but with one slight issue. For as amazing as Carter is, I think he was a little too amazing here. It just struck me as a little much that Queen Banshira's almost demise, before Diabolico finishes the job, would come down to another Carter sacrifice, which wouldn't be an issue at all if any of the other Rangers even got a shot in on Banshira. Would have been a great chance to throw everything at her as a full unit before Carter ends up doing, well, Carter things. Still a really good finale though. Maybe even great, and it ends on the perfect final shot, not of fireworks or sailing back into the great beyond, but of a team ready, anytime the call sounds again, a team willing to follow their fearless leader through it all, a team that proved to be every kind of hero, with morphers and without. Now, let's discuss the characters before breaking down the season as a whole. The supporting characters on the side of Justice proved to be very solid in their roles. Miss Fairweather is probably one of the better actors in this season, portraying her role very well and seamlessly bouncing between leading the charge for weapons advancement and needing to keep a lid on Joel. Beyond that, there's not too much else that needs to be said. If you like Kat Manx, you'll probably like Miss F too. Captain Mitchell has a lot more captivating moments within the story, but also has a lot of questionable ones too. But overall, I think it balances out, making both characters here good additions to the season. Part 1 gave you guys pretty much all my thoughts on Ryan and his well done but purposefully limited on-screen involvement. So, let's jump right into the main 5, starting with the last of the Mitchells in Dana. As a character, she's alright, but plays her role fairly flat compared to most of her cohorts. That was probably intentional to a degree, since all 3 Mitchells here share that quirk. It was never egregious, but at times it felt a little out of place. We really didn't get to see an extensive use of her medical prowess either, so that felt like a waste too, especially since that's partly why she was picked at all. All things considered, she was a good enough character, but maybe the weak link of this particular team. Chad, on the other hand, was given a ton of focus and runs with it. The only character that really had to go through a real arc was the captain and Ryan, so we don't really see that from Chad or his peers as much. Rather, we simply get to uncover novel sides of him as time goes on, be that his passion for martial arts, his agreeable yet slightly oblivious nature, or seeing his silent refusal to surrender his morpher, a scene that ranks highly among my favorite Ranger moments. We also see how that contrasts with Kelsey, with whom he shares perhaps the strongest dynamic on the show. It's simple, but they play off each other so well and create plenty of adorable moments. And it leaves me wishing that maybe we could have just skipped the whole 2 episodes of mermaid filler in favor of a deeper look into just those 2. All in all, Chad is a solid Ranger that maybe could have been great if he ever felt legitimately challenged. Like, remember how Kelsey said she'll teach Chad how to talk to girls, but then we never actually see that? It could have been fun to see the most quiet and awkward member of the team grow in that respect. Speaking of Kelsey, I think she also falls into the realm of solid Ranger. Kelsey and her infectious energy grew on me the most as the show progressed. She's a lot like Lily in that sense, that we see how her bubbly personality is used to bring the best out of others. The major difference being the writing and forethought in Jungle Fury is a lot better, so Lily's personal contributions end up mattering to the story, while Kelsey's only mattered for a couple of isolated episodes. So in that respect, she's a lot closer to Ronnie and her meaningful but limited development. And now, let's talk about Joel Rawlings. Based on what many of you could probably glean from my videos to this point, you'd likely assume that I did not like this guy at all. And that used to be the case. But experiencing Joel now, his antics simply weren't jarring this go-round, and here's why. Joel as a person is a performer, both in the air and on the ground, and initially, Miss F sees that and is put off by it. But it was when Joel starts dropping the Sky Cowboy persona, starts embracing the rescue mission more than the spotlight, and even starts showing vulnerability from trying and failing so much with her that interest starts to be piqued. We see her seeing the real Joel, the version of Joel she might have simply been waiting for, since she never really does outright reject him. I don't know how I missed all of this before, but Joel is a much more complex character than I ever gave him credit for. He can be insufferable at times, yes, but we understand where that's coming from. So despite that, he might also be the most three-dimensional character here. And it's crazy to think about how detail-oriented all of that is, given how large his personality proves to be. Quite frankly, guys, I was wrong about Joel Rawlings, which isn't to say that my thoughts now are necessarily the right ones. I'm not going to blame anyone who's still put off by him, but I'm not anymore. Because after having taken our signature closer look, I think there's so much more to see. And now, the moment we've all been waiting for. Carter Mother Effing Grayson. Despite my unapologetic idolization of the man, explaining Carter's particular brand of greatness, like most things this season, is fairly straightforward, but it'll still probably be long-winded. Carter's entire character is hero. Now that sounds kind of plain, granted, and maybe in another season it would have been played pretty plain. But as I mentioned in the lead-up video to this review, Lightspeed Rescue has an advanced understanding of what heroism should be and places it front and center for all to see. So Carter is never presented as just the moral compass, or just the fearless leader, or just the all-righteous Red Ranger, because at the core of Carter's character is the idea that he may very well be all of the above, but above all, he never ever thinks of himself as any of that. Instead, he's as humble as they come, working tirelessly to achieve an even higher peak than the high point he already starts off on. And every single character present resonates with that. While we've seen plenty of great examples of internal team squabbles, they just wouldn't make as much sense here. And even when we did have the tiniest bit of that with Joel, Carter calmly took care of it, and Joel improved as a teammate because of it. I've talked about Tommy Oliver operating with a certain hard-to-describe aura that makes you believe things will turn out right. Carter Grayson has that in spades, on top of being a more fully formed character. For these reasons and more, I can comfortably call Carter a top 5 Red, even with his top-tier peers receiving much more extensive character arcs. Carter didn't need that, though, because he was aspiring to be the hero he dreamed about long before he ever wore the spandex. He came in understanding what it meant to be self-sacrificing, knowing how to put the fate of others first, and then he just kept on doing it every chance he got, including scoffing at the fact that he damn near blew himself up. And yet, he's never too up there. He's never larger than life, except in my own mind, probably. Carter truly and deeply believes that he's just another guy, just trying to do the right thing, just trying to live up to the example of a much more influential guy. And even after said guy is revealed, that mentality never leaves him. I don't know whether or not Carter is the greatest of all time, but his very first and very last action, and damn near every action in between, involved not wasting a single second to save someone else. My sincerest apologies, Dr. Oliver, but this is the textbook definition of Ranger legend. He may not be bulletproof, but he will always be my Superman. And now, something much less thrilling. The villains. So to start off this portion with something positive, I still stand by the idea that using the demons in basically the same way Serrator was used in Samurai was clever, and it also gives Captain Mitchell a pretty potent connection to the threat. And it kind of works thematically too, in the sense that the demons operate using deception, manipulation, and not really caring about each other, unless they're forced to. Meanwhile, the response team approach of Lightspeed was very straightforward and no nonsense, except when Mitchell inexplicably forced it to be otherwise. They never threw anybody under the bus, even morally questionable people, and the team featured characters that had several genuine connecting points. It's always interesting to see contradictions in the methodology between the two sides, but since this angle was never part of the larger demon plan, it only ever goes so far. So just like when they tried this in Samurai, the scope is just too limited, and it doesn't cleanly meet up with the Queen's ultimate aspiration. Otherwise, the finale here could have been using those stones to turn Mariner Bay against the Power Rangers. And now, all of those people they worked their asses off to save need saving again. Except it's the entire city all at once, and oh yeah, we're still drowning in here. That could have been something to make the demon trickery stuff feel a lot less tacked on, at least. But at the end of the day, the reason these villains feel like an improved version of something fresh out of the Neo-Saban era is because none of them, except Viper and Olympius, have any real character traits. And Viper might just be the worst character here. I mean, my lord, what the hell did they tell her to do exactly? Are we sure the same directors that piloted Joel's fairly charismatic performance are also responsible for this?
I'll lay waste to Mariner Bay, so our Queen Banshura will rise again.
And if the demons were going to serve as the counter to what Lightspeed Rescue does, they probably should have went all in with the evil thing. The entire villain side of things should have been essentially Game of Thrones, a constant series of shifting allegiances, backstabs, betrayals, the whole package, until none of them know who they can trust. All led by Queen Banshura, who, instead of being overly obvious in her intention to murk everyone else, could serve as the very height of demon deception. She could be the one telling Viper to watch out for Loki, cause he's definitely scheming up something with Diabolico, in an effort to take out Diabolico, who is so obviously trying to obtain the role of Demon King. These Rangers eat together, train together, have fun with each other, and work very well as a unit led by the Legend. These demons could have been anything but. Throw away that friendship nonsense near the end, nobody's buying it. Just make everyone here Deviant, basically, or even Darkonda. And if they were, regardless of Viper's so-called acting, the villain side would have been engaging at least. But on top of being boring and episodic, there's no real payoff for anything they scheme up. They're all just there to get beaten one by one until the deed is done. It might just be the worst bad guy ensemble we've ever gotten in an otherwise good season. Also, one more kind of random idea as it pertains to Marina. If demons hate water, and demons are a mythical set of creatures with an established lore, could have been fun to tie the water-loving mermaids into that lore. Maybe make them long-standing historical enemies. And then, at least those 2 episodes aren't just glorified filler, all to leave our blue boy, blue bald. Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue, as I see it, is a good season, a really solid season. But I just don't think having an all-time great Red Ranger and a surprisingly good performance from the Green Ranger was enough. It's like I said in part 1, sometimes things felt too organized. However, it bears emphasizing that this mentality gave us a lot of innovative ways to look at the process of rescuing, something every Ranger team does, but not to this degree. That was beautiful, and it was arguably the best part of the season, excluding Carter. And that's why I'd like to have seen an even larger focus placed on everyday heroes becoming superheroes. It would have just made a lot more sense for Chad to be a former Marine or something and have that lend itself to saving people. His deep-sea diving experience proved valuable, especially in the end, but I feel like this season had the chance to feel more complete in that respect, especially in a franchise like Power Rangers, which to that point had a very non-existent relationship with any form of recognized authority, save Lieutenant Stone, and that was more of a Bulk and Skull thing. Joel makes a little bit more sense, but then why not just go all the way with it and make him an Air Force pilot? We can figure out Taylor later since she technically doesn't exist yet. Make Kelsey an officer or a former Army cadet and there you go. Worth noting is that the Sentai already mostly did all of that, just so I'm citing my sources here. These changes wouldn't necessarily have to change the characters, but it would bring with it a ton of important conversations. Conversations that would carry a lot more weight with the unique way the West takes pride in their everyday heroes. And then, maybe we could learn a bit more than just the past and motivations of Carter and the Mitchells. Even with the villain structure intact, Lightspeed would have easily been top 10 with a few of those modifications, but we'll get more into that when we discuss the not top 10 seasons in an upcoming video. But even for all the missed chances and misgivings, I still believe that this is a season built on heroism because it understood many of the forms it could take. Saving people was always a larger priority than literally anything else. And with Carter as the centerpiece, the Rangers always embodied that focus. And if for only that reason, I'd call it a must-watch for Ranger fans and Toku fans in general. It's clear with its intent, concise with its powerful message, and an absolute love letter to any kid, any teenager, or even any adult that still aspires to be just like their own personal heroes. And so ends this closer look into Lightspeed Rescue. I just wanted to give a special shout out to everyone who has already entered the viewer competition. I've been reading your Chronic Storm reviews and I'm loving it. And if you still want to enter, I'll throw it on the rules recap in the comments section down below. And you can also listen to the unabridged details on the back end of part 1. I'm thinking we'll end the viewer competition at around the 9th of February, so you guys still have plenty of time. So now, with one more season down, and very few seasons remaining, I'm going to spend a bit more time on other types of videos. I really want to get back into diversifying my content for you guys, and over the next few weeks, I'll be doing just that. But until then, thanks for watching.